Hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I'm here today to talk to you about my favourite books of 2023 so far, which I am very excited to chat about. We're going to talk about a lot of books, so please pull up a seat. I have a notebook here with some brief stats in, which I'm going to mention before we dive into the books themselves. So far this year, I have read 171 books, which is a ridiculous number of books. Please bear in mind that books are a big part of my job, and also they're what I like to do in my spare time. Basically, if I had to sum up what I do in general, I would just say it is books. This is not an aspirational number. This is just the number based on my career and also what I like to do in my spare time, plus mental health, because when things aren't going good, I gravitate towards more books. So even though this is the best reading year of my life, probably ever, definitely since starting my channel, it hasn't always been for the best reasons, and I think it's always good to remember that when we're listening to people talk about books. Yes, so I read 171 books. 39 of those were for a specific work project, and I had no control over what those books were. So I'm not going to mention any of those here because they're not books that I would have particularly chosen for myself, but it was just part of a freelance job that I was doing. And then outside of that, I read 132 books with a 14% DNF rate, which is not too bad, actually. I think that's okay. That works out about 24 books that I DNF'd this year. Life is too short. I don't mind DNFing books if I'm not enjoying them, unless I have to finish them specifically for work. I don't mind, I move on. So pages wise, which is probably more interesting to talk about than the number of books, because books can be all different shapes and sizes. This year I have read 33,704 pages. That doesn't include the DNFs unless I very nearly finished them, in which case I did include them in the page count. So essentially this year so far, I've read the same amount as I had the whole of last year. That's just how this year has worked out. So 33,704 pages. 85% of the books I've read so far this year are fiction, 15% non-fiction, 32% of the books that I've read have been translated, and I've read from 32 different countries. My top 10 countries that I have read from: the UK, USA, South Korea, Japan, Nigeria, Canada, Norway, Indonesia, and Argentina. 47% of the reading that I have done has been by writers of colour, and 70% of the books I have read have been published by small presses. None of these numbers and stats that I am saying to you now were goals that I had set for myself. This is just what my reading has been, and I just like tracking it, looking at where I'm gravitating towards and all of that. Because I read so many books this year, I decided, well, I couldn't decide, firstly, how many to talk about in this favourites video. I thought I couldn't possibly pick a top 10, so what I've done is I've picked a top 20. However, I then decided that I would put that top 20 in some kind of order, and when I did that, I realised I actually do have quite a clear top 10 in the end. We're still going to talk about 20 because it's fun to talk about lots of different books, but we will work our way from my least favourite to my most favourite. Everything I mention, I'll list in the description box down below. If you have been watching my videos this year and you would like to, I would love it if you could pause this video right now and leave a comment down below telling me if there are any books you expect to see on this list. Then when we get to the end of the video, you can reply to your own comment talking about how right or wrong you were, or how surprised you were, and also telling me about your favourite books, because I obviously always want more book recommendations in my life. Okay, let's get on to the books. In at number 20, we have Takeaway by Angela Hui, which is a book that I read when it was longlisted and then shortlisted for this year's Jaluk Prize, which is an award in the UK celebrating work by writers of colour. This is a memoir that Angela wrote about her time growing up in Wales when her parents ran the only Chinese takeaway in the local area. And because it's a family business, she was expected to work there all the time. She had this dual life and also very mixed emotions about this, because she loves her family and she wanted to protect them at all costs, especially because they were getting a lot of racial abuse from the locals. But also working there all the time meant she was very isolated from her peers at school. She didn't have any kind of social life. So she's talking about all of that in here, and I thought It was great. Next, number 19, we have The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. This is the first of 4 books that were on this year's Women's Prize longlist that have made it into my top 20 books of the year, which is a very good success rate for this year's prize, actually, though none of them were shortlisted for this year's award. Anyway, this book is a lot of fun. It's about a woman called Geeta who lives in a rural village in India, and a few years ago her husband went missing, but everyone thinks that she killed him. And at first she thinks, I hate that everyone thinks that I'm a murderer when I didn't kill my husband, but then she reasons that actually it's quite dangerous living as a woman on my own, so maybe it's quite good that people think I'm a murderer, because they will not come knocking at my door. However, it does mean that other people in the local area, other women who have husbands who are perhaps quite abusive and would like to be rid of them, do come knocking at Geeta's door and say, hey, I hear that you got rid of your husband, mine's terrible, can you please help? This is all at once a very funny and endearing book, but also really upsetting and tackling really hard topics, looking at domestic violence and sexual abuse. I thought that it was brilliant. I will say that a book that I read that I'd hoped would be similar to this one this year was Out by Natsuo Kirino, and I loved this one more than The Bandit Queens. It's about a woman who works at a factory, and then one day she kills her abusive husband, and then she asks other women at the factory to help her cover up this murder. It's gruesome, really dark and twisted. I adored it. However, you'd be like, Jen, why is that not on your list then? I love the first 400 out of the 500 pages, and the last 100 pages became extremely male gaze heavy with a lot of sexual violence, and it felt like it undid a lot of what had just been written. It felt like it was written by a completely different author. It was perplexing. I'm so torn about that. I loved most of it and then hated the end, and I just wanted to mention that in case that intrigues you at all. So that one is not on my favourites list. This one is, because I was not conflicted about the ending. But yeah, there we go. Number 19. In at number 18, we have another non-fiction title. This is Head Above Water by Shahd Alshammari, and this was my favourite read from this year's Barbellion Prize, which is a prize that celebrates work by disabled writers. This is Shahd writing about her diagnosis of MS and then her academic career as well. She's looking particularly at the stigmatization of disabled Arab women. This is also a book that looks at community and care work, because Yasmin, who was her student and is now her close friend, is also someone who's helped her assemble this book by going through past documents. And the way that this book oscillates between past and present tense reflects crip time too. I thought that it was really, really great. Number 17, we have a poetry collection, in fact the only poetry collection on this list so far this year, and this is Unexpected Vanilla by Hyemi, and this is translated from the Korean by Sojae. This collection of poetry examines nature, body, desire, pain. It's very magical. I really love the way that nature is personified in this book, but then in turn human bodies are, what would be the opposite of that? They are transfigured into nature themselves, so everything blurs together and the lines become very murky. Here is a quote from one of these poems. I rose from sleep and descended an endless flight of stairs. Abandoning my lamp and wetting my heels in red, I went round and round the spiral staircase, but the stairs started up again and the golden bell I'd stolen grew even heavier. Another quote here is... After I gave birth to a boneless child and lit living greens on fire, the white laundry grew bloodied. There's a lot of folklore to this, which I really appreciated. In at number 16, we have the second mention of a Women's Prize longlisted book. This is Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. This is a debut and I was really impressed by it. It is inspired by the author's family history. This is about a group of siblings who travel from Vietnam to the UK after the war, and they had wanted to go to America because they had family there, but through a series of events they end up coming to the UK in the 80s during Thatcher's Britain, and it's about them settling, trying to find and create new lives for themselves. But they are hoping that the rest of their family will be able to come and join them, but the boat that they are on doesn't make it. This is a book that gives voice to many characters over several decades, and I'll be honest, when I first realised the book was doing that, I was apprehensive. It is not a long book, and if it's covering so much ground, you want to feel as though it's not rushed, you want to feel as though all the sections are weighted appropriately, and that it all comes together at the end. And I ate my words, because this is a very well crafted book, and I do feel as though it all came together. It uses the belief of the wandering soul, which is that a soul will wander the earth if its body hasn't been buried appropriately, and also puts that in different contexts, such as the wandering souls of refugees who are still alive. Part of this book is inspired by Human Acts by Han Kang, and I would imagine also that part of it is inspired by Ruth Ozeki's Tale for the Time Being. At least that's how I felt when I was reading it. I thought that it was really powerful, and I enjoyed it. Is probably not the right word. It's a very distressing book, but I appreciated it greatly. At number 15, we have a short story collection. This is Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender, and I would recommend listening to this one on audiobook if that takes your fancy. I didn't listen to this one on audio, but I discovered after reading it in print form that the audiobook is narrated by Kristen Atherton, and she always does brilliant audiobook narration, so that's an extra recommendation for you. Anyway, Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender is a short story collection mainly about women who are being observed by other characters, or who are in turn looking at other people, and it's how everyone's judging each other and can't really settle into their own skin. My favourite story in here is about a teenage girl who's working at a fast food restaurant in a service station, and she just does not know what she wants to do with her life. She feels quite trapped in her home life in a way that she can't really articulate to many people around her. And the setting of the story is a reflection on her life situation, that she is working in this service station where people are zooming by in their cars, stopping off and like heading off somewhere. They know where they're going, and she's just stuck there flipping burgers. And the heat also in this restaurant that she has to work in, you can feel it. It is so well written, just makes you feel really claustrophobic. The whole collection though is brilliant, and I highly recommend it. Then we have got at number 14 How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart, which I think is my favourite non-fiction book that I've read so far this year. I don't think we've got any more on this list. Yep, this is my top non-fiction book of the year so far. This one is about Florentyna, because it's by Florentyna Leow, and this is a non-fiction book. This is about Florentyna moving to Tokyo and moving in with someone who she also works with, this woman who she is friends with, but then their friendship falls apart. And this is a book where she's trying to work out maybe not why the friendship fell apart, but just to grieve that friendship. She's talking about all the special moments that they had together, and how she wishes she had closure and answers as to what went on. I love the weight that this gave to female friendships, which I feel we don't always get in the books that we read. If you enjoyed Nina Mingapal's book Tiny Moons, then I think that this one would be right up your street. At number 13, we have a thriller. This is All Yours by Claudia Pineiro, which is translated from the Spanish by Miranda France. Claudia Pineiro is an Argentinian author, and this is a wonderful book, perfect for fans of Muriel Spark. It's about a woman who knows that her husband is having an affair. So one evening she decides to drive and follow him to see who he's having an affair with. She sits in her car and she watches as her husband kills the woman that he has met up with, and then he drives away, and she has to work out what she wants to do. And it's really funny, but then also becomes really dark and awful. So she knows that he's really bad at cleaning, and she thinks if she doesn't help him clean up this murder scene, he's going to get them all into trouble. But she doesn't want to tell him that she's helping him because she thinks that would embarrass him. So she just decides she's going to clean up this murder scene. She's also going to go back to this woman's flat and see if her husband has left any incriminating evidence there, just tidy things up a bit. It's very Desperate Housewives meets, as I said, Muriel Spark. It gets really, twisted. I thought it was brilliant. Then at number 12, we have another thriller. This is The Curfew by TM Logan. This is another book I would recommend on audio, having never read the audio, but I discovered after reading it in print form, it's narrated by Richard Armitage. Who wouldn't want to listen to that? So there you go. You're welcome. Bonus recommendation. This is a family novel, so we're not really following the police at all, and I quite like that in thrillers. I do also have a police procedural later on in this list, but this is my favourite family run thriller that I've read this year. That is not a genre. Okay. This is about a dad whose son has recently taken his GCSEs. He's gone out partying with his friends. He's told he must be home by midnight. The dad is awake at 2 a.m, thinks his son has missed his curfew, but he thinks maybe I didn't hear him, I'll just go check. So he goes to look into his son's bedroom, sees someone asleep in his son's bed, thinks what a silly man I am, goes back to bed. The next day, it turns out that something not very nice happened the previous evening, and all the parents are talking about it in the group WhatsApp. But the dad thinks, well, my son didn't have anything to do with it because he was at home, except then they discover that the person in their son's bed is not their son. I love the way that social media was used in this book because different generations are using different platforms. I thought that that was very true to life. And yeah, no, I just thought it was brilliant. I did not want to get back to work and not finish reading it. It was on my mind all day, the day between the 2 evenings that I read that particular book. We have another thriller at number 11. This is Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang, which I'm sure you don't need me to tell you about because everyone has been talking about it, and rightly so. This is a book about a woman called Juniper Hayward, who is a bit of a failed novelist. Her first novel was definitely a flop. She has a friend called Athena Liu who is very successful. And Juniper seems to hang out with her, maybe because she's hoping to absorb her fame through osmosis or something, but also because she thinks that if she can pick fault with Athena as much as possible, it will make her feel better about herself, which is obviously not really how life works. Anyway, at the beginning of this book, Athena chokes on a pancake and dies, has a very slapstick death, and June decides to steal Athena's most recent manuscript. She just finished writing it, no one else had seen it, so June takes it and publishes it under her own name. Athena is a Chinese American woman and June is a white woman, and this novel is about Chinese history. So June's publisher decided to rebrand her as Juniper Song because this is more racially ambiguous. As you can imagine, when the book comes out, there is a huge Twitter storm. Several, and this is about the repercussions of this book being published. As I said, it is a thriller. It is an expose of racism in publishing. It was so fast-paced, it made me so tense, I needed to get to the end. If you're looking for a book you can't put down, this is the one you need. All right, we are now into my top 10. In at number 10, we have I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This is a horrible little book, which is about a woman, we don't know her name. She is in a relationship with a man, but she's cheating on him with someone who she calls the man I want to be with. That man in turn is cheating on her with a woman that she calls the woman I am obsessed with. And this narrator starts stalking them both online and also their friends to try and get at every little element of their life that they can possibly get access to because they think that will give them some magical answer to happiness. It is about toxic relationships to online culture, and it will make you laugh, will also make you cringe, and maybe also make you want to throw the book across the room. This is definitely one for someone who likes unlikable people in their books, and that person is me. I love that. We have a few more books like this to talk about. In at number 9, we have Children of Paradise by Camilla Grudova, which was my favourite book from this year's Women's Prize longlist. This is set at a dilapidated cinema in Edinburgh. It's a cinema that I actually used to go to. It's the Cameo in Bruntsfield because I lived in Edinburgh for 4 years, and I didn't realise that until I had finished reading it, but I could definitely see how a creepy cinema like that would inspire a book like this. This is about a woman called Holly who applies for a job working at the Paradise Cinema, and when she gets the job she's put off because everyone who works there seems to have their own little clan and they don't want to speak to her. It's like she has to pass some kind of test in order for them to communicate with her. They have a secret after work film club, they drink a lot, they do drugs, and the more that Holly spends time in the cinema, the more that she feels that maybe something really odd is going on and that the films the cinema is showing are being mirrored back to them in secret rooms of the cinema. She'll stumble across scenes that she thinks she has seen in films before. It's really, really creepy. You're not sure what is real, what's imagined, because Holly starts taking drugs herself too. Each of the chapters is named after a classic film, and I did worry when I first started reading it that I would miss lots of references if I wasn't familiar with each film that was mentioned. But when I came across a chapter which was named after a film I had watched, I realised that the links were so tenuous. You do not have to know the films that this book is referencing at all. Do not let that put you off. It definitely reminded me a little bit of Moshveg in its grossness, and yeah, another twisted delight. Number 8, we have Chrysalis by Anna Metcalfe. This is a book that has been inspired by The Vegetarian by Han Kang. It is about a woman, an unnamed woman, who decides to radically change her body by going to the gym and becoming a bodybuilder. This woman has, as I said, radically changed her body, but we never get to hear from her as to why she wants to become this bodybuilder. Instead, we have a novel split into 3 sections where we listen to other people observe her from afar. The first section is told from the point of view of a man who sees her working out at the gym and then has a very odd relationship with her. The second part is from the point of view of this woman's mother, and then the third part is from a colleague of hers. After she's changed her body, she decides to start a YouTube channel where she films herself meditating in her garden, and she encourages people to be at one with nature and to separate themselves from society. Some characters in this book think that that is a toxic thing to do, when in fact she is talking about removing toxicity from your life. But it turns into this really interesting conversation about boundaries and when it is correct to sever ties with a person for self-preservation, and also when that can be taken too far as well. It also gives glimpses into discussions on online culture, which I also very much enjoyed. The next book, where are we at now? Number 7. So number 7 is a representation of an entire series. This is The Puppet Show by M.W. Craven, but number 7 is the entire Washington Post series. There are 5 novels so far. I've read all of them. I've thoroughly enjoyed them. It's about a character called Washington Poe who works for the NCA, the National Crime Agency. He lives in the Lake District. He is a disgraced detective, but is brought back in when a serial killer arrives and has written Washington Poe's name on the body of one of his victims. I just had a lot of fun with this series. It was escapist. It was just what I needed. I read it when I was recovering from surgery. And yeah, I thought it was very atmospheric. The Lake District is a great crime setting, you know? And if you are looking for a series of books following on from Frida Klein, because I have recommended that series so much, I would recommend this one. Beware that it is a bit gory in places, but it's a series that's told with a lot of heart. And yeah, it has a special place in mine now. Then at number 6, we have Miss I Sandwich by Mieko Kawakami, which is translated from the Japanese by Louise Heel Kwai. This was a surprise for me because this is the first book by Mieko Kawakami that I've actually enjoyed. I had read 2 previously, but the premise of this one just intrigued me, and I thought, okay, I'll give her one more go, and I'm so glad that I did. This is a perfectly formed short little book. It's about 90 pages long. It's about a child who is struggling at school and with his home life because his grandma is dying, and the only way that he feels centered is if he can go to the shopping mall after school and watch this woman who he calls Miss I Sandwich making sandwiches. When I first saw the title of this book and read the blurb, I misread it and thought she was making ice cream sandwiches, but she's not. She's making sandwiches, but she has blue eyeshadow and that looks like ice, so he calls her Miss Ice Sandwich. Basically, I would say that this book is like if someone had written a book about Kiko in Convenience Store Woman. It's like observing her from the outside, but then also talking about, as I said, this child's life too. I thought that thematically, symbolically, imagery-wise, there was just so much going on in such a short space of time, and it was really, really lovely. In at number 5, we have Is Mother Dead by Vigdis Hjorth, which is translated from the Norwegian by Charlotte Bolsund. I think that Vigdis Hjorth could become a new favourite author of mine. I would describe her as Norwegian Ali Smith. It's interesting seeing what themes creep up in favourite books depending on, you know, what's going on in your life at a particular time. Looking at these 20 books, I can definitely see themes of motherhood, of IVF, of online culture, of social media, as well as just a healthy dose of thrillers. So this book is about a woman called Joanna, and she has been estranged from her family for several decades, but she's recently lost her husband and she decides to travel back to Norway, having lived in the States for quite a long time. She's an artist and her family have severed ties with her because she drew pictures of them, and they didn't like how she was basically exposing family emotions to the public. They thought it was deeply embarrassing. And Joanna wants to come back and talk to her mother, but she doesn't even know at the beginning of the book if her mother is still alive. She thinks, well, people would have told me if she was dead, wouldn't they? But the lack of question here, is mother dead, like no question marks, is because she doesn't really seem to actually want to know the answer. She is much more comfortable with the idea of her mother than her actual mother at this point in time. But when she travels back to Norway, she wants to observe her mother from afar, so she decides to stake out her house and observe her. And this is all about just the inner monologue that she has while she's doing that. It's really unsettling, beautifully written. I loved it. In at number 4, we have Idol Burning by Rin Usami, which is translated from the Japanese by Asa Yanida. This is a book that really got under my skin. It's about a teenage girl who's obsessed with a J-pop star who she calls her Oshi. She runs a blog where she writes everything about him. Any fact she can find, any rumour, she will type it up, and she has loads of followers because of this. People come to her for news. She uses him as a means of escaping her own reality, her own life. We're not entirely sure what's going on, but it's open to interpretation. I read it as her having a disability or a chronic illness. You might read it as her having depression, for instance. But either way, she is using this blog and using this idea of this pop star as a way to help her cope with her everyday life. Then one day she finds out that her Oshi has been accused of hitting someone, a female fan. And she can't believe it. The reason she can't believe it is because she didn't know him in the first place, and the version of him that's in her head would never hit anyone. And now she has to dismantle her fabricated version of him because of the real life version, and it's having this huge domino effect, and she feels that that isn't particularly fair. But as an influencer, she has this duty of care. Anyway, it's all very complicated. And again, it's looking at online culture, it's looking at responsibility, it's looking at obsession. And as I said, did I say it made me cry? I think I said it got under my skin. It also really made me cry because it reminded me a lot of my teenage years and using fandom as a means to escape, in my case, disability, and how forums and online life was so important to me, and still is now. Not forums, but creating content on here is really important to me, which I know is not unique to a disabled experience, but when your body is different to other people's, and your circumstances are different to other people's, especially in most recent years, online life can be invaluable. I thought this was brilliant. Then moving into the next one is also about online culture. This is the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. This is definitely for fans of I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This is about 2 musicians called Rukmini and Neela. Neela has been around for a while. She enjoys making music. She doesn't use social media hugely. She looks down on new artists who, as she sees it, get to be famous because they can manipulate the online world, whereas she thinks if her song is good enough, it will reach the masses. That's it. Then Rukmini makes a cover of one of Neela's songs, and that cover becomes more successful than Neela's song. And Neela has to work out whether she should befriend Rukmini, whether she should be getting close to her because she wants to or because it would further her career. She feels that as 2 brown women in music, they should be supporting each other. But she also has this struggle where she feels like they both can't be successful because it's a white dominated industry and it won't let 2 brown women be successful. So if it has to be one of them, it has to be her. It has all of the horrible internal thoughts that you may ever have about somebody. At the same time as being like I'm a Fan, I would also recommend this for fans of Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. Definitely has similar conversations going on here. Just a lot of insecurities about creativity, about self, and about success. Again, it has really unlikable people in here, and sometimes they will say things that you find yourself agreeing with, followed by something so outrageous you think, how could I possibly have agreed with you before? It will get your head in a spin. Moving on to number 2, we have The Employees by Olga Raun, which is translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken. This is a very strange book about a spaceship called the 6000 ship. It is made up of a part human crew, a part humanoid crew, and they have discovered a new planet, and on this planet they have found eggs which they have brought into their spaceship. This is split up into statements from different crew members. And as the novel progresses, you find it more and more difficult to work out if a human is speaking or if a humanoid is speaking. Both humans and humanoids feel a connection with these eggs and they want to nurture them. It's all about what it means to be human, about what it means to create life. I read this as an allegory for IVF, but that's just because that has been my life for the past few years. I'm not sure if that was the intended purpose. Olgaran has a new book coming out later this year, which is about motherhood, which I'm very keen to read too. But yes, this was a really unsettling book. If you like Black Mirror, I think you'll like it. If you enjoyed Some by David Eagleman, I think that you would like it. It was just weird, but also beautiful and touching. That brings us to number one. My number one book of the year so far, and I ummed and ahed about this. This is a book that I read earlier this year, and objectively speaking, I think some of the books that I've already mentioned may be, in inverted commas, better written, but this book still is brilliantly written, the one that I'm about to speak about. But it's just a book that I've thought about so much. It hasn't left my brain, and I think for that reason it has to be my favourite. I find it haunting me a little, and that is Diary of a Void by Emi Yagi, and this is translated from the Japanese by Lucy Jones and David Boyd. This is a novel set in an office where a woman is really sick and tired of being made to do menial tasks because she is the only woman working in this particular department, and she's trying to work out how she can get the men to respect her. So Miss Shibata, that's her name, Miss Shibata decides to tell everybody in her office that she's pregnant. Thing is, she's not pregnant. She just knows that if she says that, then people will allow her to stop doing the menial tasks that she hates. And her hope is that they will come to respect her, to actually see her, to realize she is a person with a life outside of these four walls. It kind of works to begin with because they do allow her to stop doing the boring jobs, but she realizes that this newfound respect is only because she is carrying another life form. So before, if they respected her at all, it was because she could be of use to them. Now they respect her because she is carrying a baby and is going to become a mother. So they always see her as a means to get to another point rather than just meeting her as a human being, as the person she is in the form that she currently has. The book is a bit trippy as it continues, and then you're not really sure what is fact or fiction anymore. And I really like how it was open-ended in that respect. It was definitely up to you to interpret it how you wanted, and for that reason I'm not going to talk about plot anymore. But as I said, this is a book that I haven't stopped thinking about. It's very tightly written, very warm and funny, but also unsettling and upsetting in places as well. I would recommend it for fans of Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. So there we go. Those are my top 20 books of 2023 so far. Did you guess correctly if you had guessed at the beginning? Let me know in a comment down below. Please also tell me what your favourite books of the year have been, and whether you would like to read any of the books that I have mentioned here today. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed this video and you would like to subscribe, that would be very kind. And if you like my content and you would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, that would also be lovely. Patreon is a place where you can tip creators, and the support over there allows me to keep creating free content for everybody on here and funds my time making everything accessible by creating captions and all of that good stuff. I hope you're all doing okay. I'm sending lots of love, and I will see you for another video next week. Bye.